All right, kiddos, we're back. So this is the second half of 13.2, looking at algebraic expressions. So remember when we talked about if you have a number outside the parentheses, you need to distribute that number into every term that's in the expression. So if I were to go ahead and use distribution, 5 times c is 5c, and then 5 times -3 is -15. So we have a coefficient here that we distributed. So factoring out the coefficient is doing the opposite, finding that factor that would create this expression. So if I were to do this backwards and I'm factoring out the coefficient, I need to ask myself, okay, what factor times c would create 5c? Well, it would be 5. So I would factor out the 5. And then what times 5 would be -15? It would be -3. So factoring out the coefficient is you are going to be given this, a simplified expression, and you need to factor out a coefficient, or in other words, a multiple. Okay, so factoring out what number created this final expression when you multiplied or distributed. So let's take a look at another one, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to erase this. And remember, you can pause anytime during this video. So if you were just finishing up writing something, just pause, rewind, and go back. Okay. All right. So let's say I have -6z plus 12. Okay. You have to ask yourself, what times z would be -6z? So usually that's pretty easy. That first one is, right? So you know -6 times z would be -6z. So now what times -6 would be a positive 12? So think about it for a minute. What times -6 would be a positive 12? Well, we want a positive 12, right? So -2 would. -6 times -2 would be our positive 12. So you just figured out what the expression is that was being multiplied by the coefficient of -6 that would give us a simplified expression of -6z plus 12. Okay. All right, let's take a look at another one. And how about we look at, let's see here. How about 8x plus 2? Okay. What times x would be 8x? Well, if we factor out an 8 times something would be 2. And we know we want to factor this out too. So what is common? What is the greatest common factor of these both of them? Well, it's 2, right? So 2 times 4x would be our 8x, and then 2 times 1 would be our 2. So you're looking for the greatest common factor of both terms, and that should be the number that you pull out, or your coefficient. All right, so let's take a look at 36a plus 16. Greatest common factor of these two. What do you think it is? Yeah, you got it. It's 4. So pull out that 4. 4 times what would be 36a? It would be 9a. And 4 times what would be 16? It would be a positive 4. So you just factored out the coefficient, okay? So remember, this, we don't know what this is. This could be represented by a variable itself. Let's call it maybe a. And then this number that we're multiplying a by is 4. Remember, this is called the coefficient. So that's why it's called factoring out the coefficient, okay? Because we're pretending that this really is like a variable. We just don't know what it is. And then we have this multiple out here being multiplied by what's in parentheses, so that's called the coefficient. All right, so you're going to have maybe some more challenging ones, and they may involve some fractions. So let's take a look at 1/3 b minus 1/3. All right, so the greatest common factor here between both of these is just 1/3. So I'm going to pull out 1/3. So 1/3 b would, if I multiplied it, I'd get 1/3 b. And then 1/3 times what would be negative 1/3? Oh, it would be just a negative 1. So if I multiplied 1/3 times negative 1, that'd be negative 1/3. Okay, so these fractions ones, don't let them intimidate you. All right, so that is what we're looking at. Let's do one more before I let you go. So let's say I have negative 1/2 x plus 6. All right, so negative 1/2. Well, that would be the greatest common factor between this number and 6. So we're going to pull out a negative 1/2. We're going to go x. Now, half of what number would be 6? That'd be 12, wouldn't it? Now I want it, when I multiply these two though, it needs to be positive. So this must be negative. So if I did negative 1/2 times negative 12, it would give me a positive 6. Okay, so think about that. Greatest common factor is what you're looking for. If you're looking at these two terms here, what's the greatest common factor? Well, it's negative 1/2 here. All right, and then the same thing here, greatest common factor between 1/3 and 1/3 is obviously 1/3. So that is called factoring out the coefficient. So I'm going to give you practice this week on that, and a little bit of review, and then we'll hit the ground running with the one-step equations. Okay. All right. So that will be video 2 of this week. I'll give you 3 and 4. And then remember, pace yourself and work through the practice I've given you for this week. Have a great one.